All right. So tonight we're going to look at chapter 23 of Ben's book, which he titles Practice Being Home. And the line from the Song of Dharma Nature that this chapter is a commentary on is the sentence that reads, "Thus the practitioner returns to the true source." So I was pleased when Joe suggested we chant Fukan Zazengi because it is just the perfect companion to this. In terms of Dogen's focus on right here in this very moment, in this very experience that one is having. And for those of you who aren't that familiar with Dogen, it's important to note that Fukan Zazengi was his first text that he composed upon his return to Japan after 4 years in China. So he's in China from 1223 to 1227, returns back, and this was meant to represent the new form of formal Zen practice that he was bringing back with him. He had received Dharma transmission from Ru Jing, who was the abbot of Tiantong Temple. And that transmission was after being trained in this practice of zazen being the foundation of the practice. This is what Ru Jing instilled and made the heart of his Dharma talks. So this was the sense of Dharma, which Dogen then in turn brings back to Japan, which made it very different from other schools of Buddhism, which generally, I think one of the most common approaches at that point in time was to choose a sutra that was going to be the focal point of that whole tradition, be it the Diamond Sutra, or often it was the Lotus Sutra. All good, solid Mahayana texts that we study here. But the heart of the practice then became total immersion in that sutra. Dogen did not bring back with him such a sutra to found his school of Zen around. He did bring back some koans, but there was no sutra. He would go on to write many short pieces, and many of his talks were transcribed by his principal Dharma heir Uji. But relative to a sutra, like the Flower Garland Sutra, which had been written quite a few hundred years before Dogen went to China. So that was just one of the myriad Mahayana texts that was floating around. And as we know from our study of Ben, that sutra was the fundamental text for the Huayan tradition. So here comes Dogen saying that's not at all essential. Just practice zazen. It is the style of practice that as Ben's title puts it, allows us to practice being home. So as soon as we enter the Zendo, when we're sitting as a Sangha, we walk to our cushion, bow, turn and bow to everyone else. And then we sit and practice being home. That's very literally what we're doing. Our home then is that cushion. And we spend the next 25, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, however long, in that practice. And as the actual text from the poem puts it, thus the practitioner returns to the true source by being present and meeting each thing that's arising. That is returning to the true source. So we are always in touch with the true source. It's in Fukan Zazengi that Dogen talks about going beyond thinking, sometimes translated as non-thinking, that is the art of zazen, beyond thinking. It's through this practice of going beyond thinking that we are able to return to the true source, that which is arising. Otherwise, we're simply bringing our filters, our karmic conditioning to everything that comes up. And there's no transformation at all possible. Because you're going to continue to see things as you've been accustomed to. And what leads people to the practice, to the arising of bodhicitta, is this sense that that's not satisfactory. I've been there, I've done that, I'm doing it again and again and again, and I want to break through that pattern. I need to see things in a different way. And of course, zazen is a way that one can do that. It may not be the only way, but it's certainly an effective way that's been practiced for many, many, many centuries and is still, growing in popularity even in our day, as a means of practicing being home, returning to the true source. And as Ben puts it, it is practice that brings us to realization. And that's Dogen, that's straight Dogen. Practice is realization. So actually, it's still somewhat misleading the way Ben phrases it. Because to say practice brings us to realization, we're at the point of a means to an end. And if you practice and practice and practice, if you're lucky, you may attain realization. That's not Dogen's message. That wouldn't have been all that radical. That could have fit in nicely with a lot of other traditions. What made Dogen such a controversial figure was he was saying, when you practice, you are realized. That is realization, the act of practicing. But he adds a qualifier there, because obviously one can go through the motions of practice, and including zazen. And that's not what he's referring to. So he includes the term bendawa, wholehearted way. We have to wholeheartedly practice. That's why a term we use regularly, sincerity, authenticity. So it has to be authentic practice with our total self, not ourself that's just trying to gain something at the end of the day, but this going beyond self, which is included in going beyond thinking, because self is simply a fabricated thought. We have a thought of ourselves. So beyond thinking is beyond self, and it's beyond anything else. So it starts to resonate with the Heart Sutra, all the negatives. It's not that they're wrong, it's that we need to go beyond them, because each and every one of them becomes a place where we get hooked. And they are just skillful means, not to reach some external end, but they are skillful means to allow realization right here and now. So that's the unity of practice and realization. We don't practice in order to bring us to realization. Practice is realization. So practice becomes whatever it is we're doing. So it can take any shape whatsoever, and that can become practice. Dogen in Fukan Zazengi emphasizes this practice of seated meditation facing the wall, because it's the way to, I'll use the word purity here, which I'm going to come back to anyway, because it does come up in this chapter. And I wanted to elaborate a bit further on it from what Ben is talking about. But this sense of pure letting go, because we are, and the just in shikantaza, just sitting. To practice shikan, just, kind of entails, requires letting go. Otherwise, we're not just doing that. We're doing other stuff as well, and maybe we're doing that in order to attain something else. But if we're practicing shikan, whether it's taza, or eating, or walking, or working, or reading a sutra, whatever it is, we are just doing that, period. So I think it makes sense to talk about a sense of purity of practice in that regard. Even recognizing that purity is a term we have to be careful with. But we'll get into that in a little bit. So, Ben, because there's a temporal aspect to this, our practice, while it puts us in touch with the ultimate as it's present right here and now, yet it plays out within our daily lives, a life that is working with this and that, with past, present, and future. So he talks about how teachings on karma emphasize that what we do now plants the seeds for the lives we will have in the future. So practitioners can see this play out in their practice, because like any other form of practice, and I'm fond of using music as one of those, so I'll use that, but there's that sense of concerted effort initially, but then once gains Once one gains some measure of mastery, then one has, through all that practice, you've kind of created the seeds for your current level of activity. And you are able then to let go of all that training. And I don't mean just it's gone, it's still there, but that's not an area that you're any longer focusing on. You've covered that territory. So even in the world of classical music, artists early in their career interpret works very differently than they do late in their career after they've arrived at some maturity in their understanding of composers, of the instrument, and all the other factors that come into play over the course of time. So we change. We have to because of the teachings of impermanence. So given that, it's a question of how could we account for that change? And karma is a wonderful open-ended. It's not some rigid linear pattern of cause and effect, but taken in an open-ended fashion. It's a nice way of portraying how impermanence plays out over time and how our practice actually does inform our practice. It's not that it's a means to an end, but through practice, through devoted practice, and this is a reason why people go off and do extended retreats, not just for that moment, but it's also kind of conditioning them, we could say, once they return from that extended practice period. They now can bring that experience of such intensified practice, and it helps to inform their practice from that point forward. It's kind of like pushes it along. Now, as Dogen points out in Fukan Zazengi, what need is there to leave the seat in your own home? It's not, and the important thing to realize there is it's not because you've gone to some, awesome place, a spa or something, a resort center. We don't have to go to any of those. It could be anywhere. It's just a matter of carving out the time and finding a structure, a container for that to take place. If you're lucky enough to live next door to one of those, then you don't have to even pack a bag. But most of us don't. But the real heart of the matter is exactly as Dogen portrays it. It's not about going off on pilgrimages. Not at all. It can happen right at your home on your own zafu. Don't look at it that you have to be in some other great spiritual place in order for that to happen. You do not. Right where you are is the only place it can happen. And that's true regardless of where you happen to be at any particular time. And then, as Ben puts it, with practice. So in other words, if you are wholeheartedly doing the practice, then each person can arrive where they already are. That's what practice being home is really shaking out to. It's so you could arrive where you are. But I mean, really arrive. Of course, you're always there. But that's not where your practice is taking you. Your practice, this is practice with the lowercase p, is taking you myriad places, myriad distractions. But genuine Bendowa practice, then each person can arrive where they already are. Because this, as we already saw, is the source of all existence and all liberation. It's the original source, or the original face, as it's sometimes referred to in the koan literature, with admonitions like, show me your original face, your original source. Which is something that we're always with. We're always in. Hence koans about Buddha. Where's Buddha? What's Buddha nature? Cypress tree in the garden. It's right outside the door. It's right here and now. Core Zen teachings that have to do with practicing being home. So dharma nature, and remember the poem we're actually studying, which is kind of inspired by the Flower Garland Sutra. The title of the poem is The Song of Dharma Nature. And essentially, Ben points out, true source is synonymous with reality or Dharma nature. So this original source is the song that we're looking at line by line. And this Dharma nature, he goes on to say, is closely related to the idea of nature arising. Dharma nature, nature arising. So it's not something fixed, it's not something permanent. It's always arising. And all phenomena depend on emptiness. So this idea of nature arising is a portrayal of suchness. That's nature arising, moment after moment. Because of the emptiness of all things, everything coming together to create this moment. And that requires a deep realization of no self. Because our conditioned way of seeing things has myself playing a huge role, the leading role. So everybody's playing the leading role in their narrative. And when that's the case, then we can't have the sense of nature arising. Truly. We may just kind of touch on it because we can have a sense of how wonderful nature is. But tied in with that is the understanding of my nature and that, oh, I'm pretty wonderful because I appreciate that. I love nature. And then we start getting trapped in that perspective. Nature's arising. It's mundane, but very special too at the same time. But it can be extremely special and still be mundane. It's happening everywhere, always. So realization, I think one of the hallmarks of it is that those two can actually become conjoined. What's mundane and ordinary becomes special, awe-inspiring. And this is the state that we're already always in, this dharma nature, true nature, reality. But it takes practice in order for us to realize that and to truly live that. Otherwise, we just keep reverting back to sense of self and the distinction, self and other. Because that's the way we've always seen things. So it's only natural that that's what we will continue to revert back to. So the importance of awareness, of attentiveness that zazen is instilling in us is to see when that sense of self is manifesting and to realize that that's not realization. We have to realize, become awakened to our delusion, as Dogen puts it, realize that we're not realizing because we are in delusion. We have to awaken to that regularly because that's where our life is led. And what I'm mapping out here is just kind of some general descriptions of our ordinary deluded selves. But the reality is, as Ben points out, that we all have our particular conditioned ways of being. So everybody's deluded in their own unique ways. But we can point out some similarities as skillful means to try and help people work with that. And I think Ben puts it rather nicely with this statement. He says, it's through our practice as people with various habits and backgrounds that we can come to the truth that Buddha sees. So, in other words, our practice, in one sense, is kind of uniform. And that's an important aspect of practice, of harmony, of coming together and practicing kind of in synchrony, practicing together. But yet, we each practice on our own as people with various habits and backgrounds. And it's through that means that we can come to the truth that Buddha sees. That's realization, is seeing the truth that Buddha sees. Because Buddha simply means awakening, the awakened one. So when we are awakened, we're not separate from Buddha. That's why Buddha is a term that's constantly used. And the name for this tradition takes its name from that fact, Buddhism. It's the practice of realizing your Buddha nature, becoming one with Buddha. Some people actually see Christianity in somewhat similar way. Practice Christianity to become one with Christ. That's pretty radical too now. I think they're a distinct minority of that tradition. But it's certainly one way of viewing that practice, one way of approaching it, I think. So one's own body and mind are precisely the essence of Vairochana. Vairochana being the original Buddha, sometimes referred to as Dharmakaya in the three bodies of Buddha. Dharmakaya is the Dharma body, because Kaya just means body. So our own body and mind are precisely the essence of Dharmakaya, of the first Buddha, Vairochana. Precisely. There's no difference, no gap, no separation. That's to see one's true nature, is to understand that we all have that, but not everybody will realize it. So our practice is to realize it and to live from that realization. And hence, it's called returning to the original source. That's what Dharmakaya represents, is returning to the original source, the first Buddha, the true nature of all things. So we're simply returning to it, which we can do because that's us. That is us. So we very much can do that, as can anybody else, regardless of what their path is. So Ben expresses this by saying, faith in one's total identity with Buddha is a powerful medicine. But it's, when I hear a statement like that, I traveled back many years to my freshman year of college, and there was a classmate who was convinced he was the second coming of Jesus. So this sense of one's own total identity with Buddha, it's important to understand. It's not this individual and the role he played. That's in a very limited way. Rather, it's going beyond any individual. It's seeing yourself, understanding, realizing the nature of reality, and that I'm not separate from that. It's kind of the Hindu, that art thou, Atman and Brahman. Except they treated those as substantial entities. So that's why Buddha called his teaching An-Atman, no Atman. So no Atman, no Brahman, because they're not separate. So Buddha could get to a similar place, but in a more direct way, I think, to see that Atman, Brahman, these are just notions you've created. If you let those drop off, then you realize you are it. And that's what we're talking about in terms of one's total identity with Buddha. It's not that you're the second coming. It's that Buddhas are appearing regularly. So part of our practice is to see them all around us. Not to get so inflated because I'm the Buddha. Because again, we come back to the sense of no self. You can't realize your Buddha nature if you're lugging around that sense of self that I am Buddha nature. That's got to drop off. So that's why realized Zen practitioners don't require hospitalization because they think they're the second coming. Because we don't. We don't. We think we're coming and going constantly. And that's part of the original source is this coming and going. We're in tune with that. So tying this all into Huayan, Ben says that these Huayan texts, like the one we're studying or the Flower Garland Sutra, they give us practices to help realize it so that we can shape our lives, lead our lives in such a way that we can regularly have this sense. And he states that one very important practice that's required in order to help realize it is an ethical life. Hence the central role of precepts. From Jukai to priest ordination to dharma transmission to funeral services throughout. And of course, our monthly full moon ceremony. This is the importance. An ethical life is key to this practice. Because as Ben puts it, it's impossible to embody Buddhahood while engaging in harm. But, I also jotted a question mark next to that because we have to be careful in terms of harm and getting caught up in dualities of benefit and harm and having the delusion that those are clear cut, because they're not. One can make a pretty compelling case that we're always doing harm, regardless of what our intention might be. To live is to cause harm. It's kind of baked into that whole process. That doesn't imply that we just take a laissez-faire approach to ethics and just say, well, if I'm always causing harm, then I'm gonna enjoy it. I'm gonna make sure it's working well for me, and just kind of blow it off. Rather, that's why I like to put it in terms of caring, that we care always. And part of caring is not the practice of ahimsa, non-harming, because we recognize that's just not reality. That there are forks in the road where we have to take one, and they both entail some harm. Maybe one group of people gets harmed if we go down that path, and a different group, maybe fewer people, get harmed if we go down the other path. This is where ethics meets reality. So can we care about the situation on both of those forks and then have that inform our decision rather than taking an unrealistic stance that it's impossible to embody Buddhahood while engaging in harm? Because that can't be done. We shouldn't be practicing this if that was the case. Because I, I feel strongly that we do cause harm unknowingly. We can lead an ethical life and try not to do harm. But the reality is we do. In some situations we're confronted with, we have to do harm. I won't get into modern ethical theory and the trolley. Look it up. That's a great example. If you have to do harm, so what are you going to do? Are you going to divert the train so it doesn't hit the person right in front of you? But then it'll kill a few extra people on its new path. So this is the situation in front of you. Somebody's going to die, and you're in control because you're at the switch lever there. Are you going to throw that switch or not? Because by throwing the switch, you're reluctant to do that because that makes you an agent in the whole thing. So this is, a beautiful, kind of funny, but at the same time, very credible. We get the fact that, that's kind of an apt description of the dilemmas we encounter. So that's what maybe the most broadly held view of ethics, utilitarianism, is all about. Attaining well-being, happiness for the greatest number of people. Not for everybody. They would never propagate that because they'd say, well, you can't do that. Why propagate an ethics that you can't accomplish? People will be harmed just by carrying that out to accomplish good for the greatest number of people. If we do that here, maybe Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, they could be harmed. We're probably not inclined to mourn that that harming all that much, but it's the reality. And how far down are we going to go on that economic ladder in terms of caring for the greatest number of people to increase overall happiness to a maximal amount? So I guess my only case here is that I do think a term like caring is up to providing a basis for ethics, that we care for everybody. And then that becomes kind of our guidepost. And not picking and choosing. We care for everybody. That's important. So just in finishing up here, the last sentence that I jotted down from Ben's text does introduce the term pure and consciousness. And I wanted to talk a little bit about both of those. And it's 8:30, so if I promised to only take a couple of minutes, I think we can squeeze this in. And this is kind of a summation too, so it's a good place to wrap this up. Ben says, we can practice anywhere, and there are myriad practices. To practice and return to where you are is to embody Buddha, naturally pure awareness, and then awareness, I kind of jotted down consciousness, because we talked about this on Saturday, in fact, about consciousness. I think, Joe, you had posed the question about is consciousness sentience, basically, recognizing self. And I said, as Michael Pollan uses it in his new book, and I have also checked, and I think the more consensus take on consciousness is it is awareness. So naturally pure awareness or consciousness, pure consciousness. And it just so happened sometimes when I wake up in the middle of the night, I'll decide I might need a little aid to get me back to sleep. So I pull up a Great Courses lecture, and that's my aid. and last night, as luck would have it, the professor's giving a lecture on Kant's critique of pure reason. So I go, thank you. This is just what I need tonight. So in Kant's critique of pure reason, pure means completely independent of all sensory experience. So it applies across the board. And that's, of course, what Kant was doing in his critique of pure reason. I'm going to get into that because that would take us a couple of years. But I think you get the idea just from that description that it's independent of what we're sensing. It has this universal characteristic. And that's practice. That's why it's everywhere we are, anytime, it's always there. Through pure consciousness. That's the purity. Isn't, clearing it of defilements. It's just that it's no longer dependent upon this particular set of conditions, this sensory input that I'm receiving. It's across the board. That's how we can speak of it from a universal standpoint. That I find that everything I encounter, like, is impermanent or interdependent. That's not dependent upon, we keep checking, this is interdependent, that's interdependent, and we just keep record because we're waiting for that one that's not. And then we've disproven Mahayana Buddhism. But no, we accept this as being universally the case. And it's our pure consciousness, I would say, following in line with both the Flower Garland Sutra and Immanuel Kant. It's our pure consciousness that opens that up for us. And we might even use a term like intuitive insight for that. Which is why we don't need to keep empirically checking. We just accept that's the nature of things. We see that with pure consciousness, no longer dependent upon our senses. We've gotten plenty of sensory input, and it's all painting the same picture. So that's my take on the chapter. So let me bow out. We can still find some time for discussion, questions. Joe?
Just one quick note. This seems like it nicely knits together the beginning of your talk with your finishing remarks. Mm-hmm. This is from Flower Garden Sutra, page 16.
Oh,
No matter how far you go, you are in the original place, and no matter whether you arrive, you're at the place of departure.
hmm. Yeah.
And for some reason, I marked that with a bookmarker, and I'd like to look at that one somewhere.
Yeah. No, I agree. That jives nicely with where we ended up here. Yeah, Glenn.
I'm gonna piggyback on that. The middle of page 154, you would pick out the line. It is through our practice as people with various habits and backgrounds that we can come to the truth that Buddha sees. It's the next sentence that really struck me. It is because we are limited and conditioned that we can return to the limitless, unconditioned present moment.
Yeah.
You know, the true realization, Buddha nature, everyone has it. It is our true, actual, like, identity, our personhood, you know, that's what we are. But we're deluded from knowing that through our daily lives. And some people are more deluded about it than others. And I keep thinking of the image of a veil being lifted, or the fog being cleared.
Yeah.
Right? We're constantly, in our daily lives, we're constantly struggling through this fog. And when we sit, we can clear the fog and see our true nature. It's always there. We can always come back to it. But the fog is always there for us to have to cut through.
Yeah.
So I also think of I don't know if a sword is the right analogy or the right metaphor for cutting through fog. But, through zazen, we sharpen our sword and we can cut through that delusion to see our true nature. So, but that can only happen because of our delusion.
Yeah.
So the delusion is almost like a condition for our
for our practice. Exactly. I like that. Yeah, that's a good point.
I read somewhere recently, and it might have been here somewhere, it said, remember, even delusion is a part of our reality.
Yeah. Definitely. And as Glenn's pointing out, it's what moves us to practice, so that we can be wholehearted about it.
Dean?
Yeah, Mark.
So if I guess I'm having trouble understanding what is it if there's no self, what is it that we're if we're able to realize our Buddha nature and our pure consciousness and the fog lifting, what is that if there's no self?
So you think it's dependent upon a self then? That you couldn't have it without a self? If we let go,
I guess it's the realization of it that I'm struggling with. Like, doesn't there need to be a self to have this realization? Like,
no,
not really.
not really.
Okay.
And this is kind of it also ties in, if you think about it, with this sense of suchness, that everything comes together moment after moment to form this. Just this is it. And within that just this, that's constantly changing, where is there room for a self? Some fixed point. It's just saying there's no fixed point. Actually, all reality is suchness. It's things in their interdependence coming together and creating this moment. But as soon as they've done that, we're on to the next one. That's the nature of reality and our sense of time, the flow of time. So we take self and the flow of self, it kind of flows right out of existence in terms of our view of self as being something real, substantial, that remains through all the changes. Because we're just part of that suchness. As was the Buddha. That hence his title of Tathagata just means thus come one. Thusness and suchness are the same thing. So the Buddha is no self. He's just thus come and thus gone. Tathagata means both of those. Thus come, thus gone. That's us.
So is it just the ego then that, like, oh, you think, oh, I'm practicing, and all of a sudden you feel this sense of liberation and freedom from whatever it might be, suffering, for example, or that sensation or realization or feeling is just reality. It just,
Yeah,
it's not necessarily, oh, that's mine.
right.
That's
Right.
my liberation.
Yeah,
Because my mind wants to cling on to, oh, wow, this is like a breakthrough, like I'm special.
right. Sure. Exactly.
Yeah,
And you see how much dukkha, how much suffering gets propagated out of that view. We're the special ones.
right. Okay.
That's dangerous. I don't suggest adopting that mindset.
Yeah. So what is it about, like, I think, well, one good thing about getting older is I don't suffer as much from worrying about what other people think, for example, or, um,
There's
yeah,
that.
what's
Yeah.
that?
There is that for sure. But
But
no self.
I think it's mine though. I think it's like, that's my progress in life. That's
Mhm.
like, I achieved that through whatever, I don't know what, living and experiencing and trial and tribulation and whatnot. But
Yeah.
that realization is just pure conscious. I mean, that's just pure consciousness. That's just pure realization.
Yeah.
It's not I don't get to own that shit.
Right.
Okay.
You really don't want to, trust me.
All right. Thank you. That's helpful.
Okay. Anything else? Or are we good? Oh, Nick.
I was just, listening and picking up on a couple words and just bringing to mind other little things. And I hope that they're helpful, but, or at least contributing to the sum total of thinking, or maybe not
Right.
thinking. But yeah, I was talking about sort of wanting to own your progress individually, or those kinds of things. And that language of me and mine struck the ear just because I was thinking of, I think it's probably in some of the early sutras in the Dhammapada, there's Buddha says something to the effect of that all suffering is caused by all of this business of me and mine. Is that how he says it? Or
Yeah.
and I'm trying to think of what the other thought was, but it'll come to me here in a moment. Or maybe it won't. If so, it wasn't important. No, I'm not recalling what it was now, but so it must not have been that important.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, and that's the first point you made kind of called to my mind this giving away the virtue of our practice. You know, the benefits are these aren't things we're looking to hold on to.
Right, and
And
that
this,
mhm.
yeah,
Yeah, that reminded me of my other point, which was just some, I forget who I was listening to speak on the Bodhisattva vow, and their kind of point was, you know, well, it's the seemingly impossible task and liberating all beings and all this, but if you don't have that sense of separate self, then you know their point being that your liberation is everyone's liberation, that total consciousness that everyone
right.
is a part of, that you're contributing to the subtotal of consciousness that's being liberated from that separation. So your liberation
Exactly.
is everyone else's as well.
Yes, yes. And that's part of our realization is seeing it in just that light. So our practice, any merit that we accomplish, it's all just open the hands of merit, not just opening the hand of thought, but anything, benefit, merit. We just send it forth. There's no holding on to any of it because there's nothing to hold on to. There's no body to hold on to it. It's just, it's all a gift. Existence, what we receive. If we see what we receive as a gift, then there's that realization that will actually, my role then becomes just to keep passing it along. It's a gift. And everything else is too. So I don't have to hold on to it because I need it. More gifts are coming my way.
Einstein said, I claim credit for nothing.
See? Right. He gave it all away. No patents, right?
So when they say in the evening gatha about do not squander, how does it go? Do not squander this.
Your life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which really means do not squander this moment. If we want to really shake that out.
Yeah, because you could sort of interpret that as, you know, well,
Yeah.
I do exist. So 'cause
Right.
this guy's
I have
telling
a
you that,
life. Yeah.
yeah, the evening gatha tells you to not squander.
Yeah.
But
Your
what am I squandering if I don't exist?
right. In this moment.
The
That's
moment.
the only thing that's here that you could squander.
Yeah,
This
right.
moment.
Hmm.
Continuous practice, as Dogen put it. Never ending.
I've attended, as you know, some funerals and celebrations of life lately, and I've heard a lot of eulogies, and it's funny because I just was thinking about, I want my eulogy to say Mark did not squander his moments.
Right. There you go. I love it.
Oh, God.
That would be a beautiful remembrance.
Yeah, right.
Celebration.
I'll have to add that one. I'll write my own eulogy. Here, read this for me.
He was special.
Right.
What did he say?
Joe said he was special. He stood out.
On that note,
On that note, we're going to chant out. I vow to myself and to each of you to commit myself daily to the healing of our world and the welfare of all beings, to live on earth more lightly and less violently in the food, products, and energy I consume, to draw strength and guidance from the living earth, the ancestors, the future generations, and my brothers and sisters of all species, to support others in our work for the world, and to ask for help when I need it, to pursue a daily practice that clarifies my mind, strengthens my heart, and supports me in observing these vows. All right, well, good night, and we'll be back Saturday morning to return to our study of Hongzhi's Guidepost of Silent Illumination. All right.